His name's Jay Olivia, and he's my next guest. Today, he's going to pitch his interpretation of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. However, he's going to do it as an HBO-style series.
I was excited for this because I love hearing people's reimaginings of shows and movies, especially when time has passed and there are new and different ways to approach media. And He-Man is not exactly timeless. He-Man was a Conan-style show, the sci-fi elements, and completely black and white morality, and these elements make it super dated. 1983 to 1984 might as well be called the era of He-Man, and very few people wouldn't know what time you were referring to, if only for the fashion. But the characters are lovable, concepts are sound, and the appeal of a reboot is all right there. But Jay Oliva's reboot really disappointed me. His idea for an HBO-style show focused on drama, and none of it ever rang true to me as a He-Man story.
Well, it looks like the sorceress is throwing some kind of far-out party.
I found myself watching this video and wanting to debate and maybe pitch my own reboot idea as a He-Man fan myself. So this video is sort of a response to Jay Oliva's pitch, but maybe more using it as a jumping off point to talk about what I would do differently and how I would reboot He-Man. On a completely superficial level, an action show with fantasy and sci-fi elements being remade does look like a good candidate for drama, and I can see how much work Jay Oliva put into thinking about this, but it misses all the points of what He-Man is about and all of its charm.
How did it go with him?
Everything went fine.
Don't you get awfully tired of being a hero all the time?
The idea of something being remade in a different genre doesn't seem wrong to me. In fact, I love very different interpretations of stories and characters. It's interesting to see what people come up with and how they process what they see. I'm more than aware of the 2002 reboot created by Mike Young Productions that aired on Cartoon Network. That was actually how I got into the show. I really liked a lot of the creative choices they made. And there are a lot of ways I think it does improve on the 80s show. But it didn't take long for the 80s show to win me over with its humor, sincerity, and heart. As much as I like the 2002 reboot, it doesn't really have either of those three things. It was like the era of extreme edgy kids TV, and in that way, it's almost as dated as the 80s Masters of the Universe. But this is one of the main reasons Jay Oliva's pitch disappointed me so much. As he says, he actually worked on the Mike Young reboot himself, and he references pieces of the 2002 reboot plenty of times, but that's the thing. The edgy road has already been taken. We don't need another one. We don't need an even more adult show. And I don't know anything about Game of Thrones. Maybe there's a really clever mashup here I'm just not seeing. But as a He-Man fan, objectively, all I see is an example of stripping more and more of the fun from He-Man. The whimsy and character focus of the original is completely gone in Oliva's pitch. And in that, I think the soul of He-Man is completely lost too. I'm not saying that you shouldn't enjoy Jay's pitch. Clearly, he put a lot of thought into it, and if drama is your thing, this probably seems great. That's the beauty of interpretations. None of them are actually wrong. You know, art is subjective. And this is just my own perspective. But for the sake of making a point and sticking to my guns, I am going to treat my own opinion like it's the right one as I go through the video. My ultimate goal here isn't to tear down Jay Oliva, but to offer my own perspective. And this video just made it too tempting. But no actual disrespect to Jay Oliva. He's a successful film director, and I'm just one nerdy nobody on the internet. Taking me too seriously would be a mistake. And with that all out of the way, let's dive into this video.
My name is Jay Olivia. My pitch would be a remake of the Masters of the Universe, which is a very popular Mattel toy line back from the 80s. As a kid, I remembered it one way, and I saw it as an adult and as a filmmaker, and I was like, okay, there's some things I would fix, as well as still understand what the charm of the original was.
This is what made me excited for this video. He said he'd understand the charm of the original. But that's the only time He-Man's charm shows up at all in this pitch.
Mattel wanted to do Star Wars, but they also wanted to do Conan. So they decided to, let's just combine the two and create something called the Masters of the Universe. One of the things that I want to do is I wanted to have a broad kind of epic storyline where we went from He-Man and went through his journey of Prince Adam, getting the sword and becoming the hero that we all know and love. But then at some point I wanted to add a little bit of tragedy where something went wrong into the storyline. And then I wanted that to be the transition to She-Ra, Princess of Power, and then do her storyline but with still Prince Adam as kind of like this kind of through story, almost like how Anakin Skywalker is in the Star Wars movies.
Because everyone loves Anakin so much.
So we kind of bring it back to Adam's story, Prince Adam's story, or King Adam at that point.
Okay, so the idea of an overarching storyline that includes She-Ra, that I actually like. But I don't like that it's where he starts his pitch. He-Man should always focus on the characters. But saying that He-Man is all over the place is a huge understatement, and I do love the idea of bringing in She-Ra and the Horde to make the stakes concrete. I don't know about this tragedy two-act business, but bringing the He-Man characters to face that real threat along with She-Ra really does appeal to me, so keep talking, Jay.
Engage the audience, give you characters that you love, because of course, you know, everybody's going to like He-Man, but I think he's got a really good supporting characters. I would, of course, have Teela, I would have Man-at-Arms, you know, the whole roster of characters, as well as his father, King Randor and Queen Marlena. I'd even bring in Hordak, which is She-Ra's arch nemesis.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. Points off for not mentioning Orko even once. And spoilers, he doesn't mention him throughout the video.
How come I never get any credit?
If you know me, you already know that I love Orko. I just think he's cute and funny. But the thing that really bothers me about Jay's failure to bring up Orko is it shows me that he is choosing to ignore a fundamental part of Masters of the Universe. And not just Orko as a character, but he represents whimsy and heart and being different. And Jay's reboot idea can't handle that. It needs to be so dramatic and so serious that it can't have Orko. Do you see the problem with this? It's not He-Man without Orko. No matter how much you dislike Orko, he's an incredibly major character and actually a big deal. If you're going to remake He-Man, you need to include Orko. And if you can't include Orko, you shouldn't be remaking He-Man. It's as simple as that. To me, cutting out Orko means that Jay has missed an enormous piece of what He-Man is, which is fun. And I'm going to bring that up a lot. It's fun. That's the thing about He-Man. It's fun. Orko is fun. And if you can't handle fun, you can't handle He-Man.
Bring him into the fold, as well as King Hiss and all the Snake Men. Some characters you'll fall in love with, some characters will die. A character that you may have hated will at one point redeem himself and become someone that you love. It's a lot of these strong personalities and their motivations and how sometimes those motivations go against other people. Same thing with Breaking Bad. Like, you're watching Breaking Bad, the series, and it totally takes the idea what you think that series is going to be and just turns it upside down and gives you something entirely new. And I think the idea for Masters of the Universe could be something like that, where we take an idea and then really flesh out everybody's personality. All these different factions all have their own motivations, and I think that's something that I think no one's really touched upon.
Okay, so, Jay, this isn't Breaking Bad. This is He-Man. Listen, I love moral ambiguity. I love characters with different motivations and different senses of right and wrong, willing to do or not do different deeds to make things happen. But He-Man will never be that show. He-Man has always been based on the idea that there is black and white morality, and while I think that's bogus in real life, and I can think of a lot of ways, He-Man could be more flexible with it. Whether we like it or not, this is a fundamental part of the show. It's like what I said about Orko. If you want to remake He-Man, you have to keep the things that make it He-Man, whether you like them personally or not. Moral ambiguity is not He-Man's bag.
And I think because of that, like I would say, I would start the story small, follow the story of Prince Adam, you know, get the audience to understand him, and then slowly open up the world to the point where whenever you jump to a different character, you just can't wait to come back to that character because their story is so compelling and it's so different than everybody else's.
Actually, one of the great things about a reboot or a remake that no other type of media can really boast is that you already know the characters. So you can kind of just jump in and expand them even further. You don't need to reintroduce them. You already have all that established lore, and that can be a really huge asset. But, you know, if that's what he wants to do, that's probably fine.
Take what we know and love about the characters, expand on it, but still stay true to the characters. Take the character of Prince Adam. You know, everybody thinks that, oh, he's a good kid, he gets a sword, and he becomes He-Man, and He-Man is, you know, true justice in the American way, so to speak.
Eternian way.
Now the thing is, what we did in the old 2002 series, when When Prince Adam lifted the sword up above and he called, by the power of Grayskull, he's actually channeling King Grayskull, who is basically the founder of, I guess, the human race on Eternia. Putting the power of this Grayskull inside of him, but he still was himself. It's a very like Shazam or Captain Marvel storyline. Just like with the Game of Thrones with Ned Stark, when you play the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die, and that's the same thing I think with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
You either win or you die? Have you ever seen an episode of He-Man? You either are kind or you lose. That's He-Man.
You have risked imprisonment to save the life of a mere pet. Why?
All life is precious, Your Majesty. A man's, a woman's, a child's, and yes, even a pet's.
As things either work his way or work against him, you'll start to see his motivations change. Not just start with Adam's story, but allude to things that happened beforehand. Kind of show when Randor, before he became king, what did he have to do to become king? Him and his half-brother Keldor, who eventually becomes Skeletor.
Okay, I'm just going to stop right here. I know this might be unpopular, but the idea of Skeletor being Randor's half-brother, or even having ever had a face, is hugely boring to me, and I'm going to skip all of this. If I had my way, a reboot would never have Keldor. Enough said.
The reason why Skeletor wants to take over because he's like, he should be there, because he's because of his background. So also trying to live, racial aspects. Daughter Tila is now best friends with Adam, so you play up that dynamic. Now, I wouldn't do a love thing. I would do a thing where it's mostly like they grew up together and there's competition. It would be some things that would happen in the story that I plan on doing that happens to Tila that will eventually push Adam one way or the other, all because of their relationships with their other characters, somebody that he loves. Something might happen to his mother, for example, Queen Marlena. You never really hear much of her. It's always about his dad, and she's always just like, listen to your father. And I wanted to kind of add that to his kind of storyline so that when things happen to Tila and eventually maybe to his mother, that might eventually push Adam over the edge.
This is where I actually started to get kind of mad. Something happening to Tila or Queen Marlena, two of the most powerful women in the show, to motivate He-Man to make choices is lazy and sexist. The 80s were a long time ago now, and they made it a point to show that men and women on Eternia are equal.
Well, it's hard to believe that at one time they thought men were better than women.
Tila is captain of the guard, and Queen Marlena was an astronaut from Earth, and the best pilot on the planet. Treating them like objects that Adam can cry over is just insulting. Let's not do this.
Even though He-Man is the hero, we needed Adam, from what he learned from his father and all of his support group, to become a hero without the power, so to speak, and convince the other factions to be like, hey, we have to band together for this greater evil. Most versions of Skeletor has been, he's a bad guy, he wants to control the world. Skeletor, his original name was Keldor, and he's a half-brother to King Randor. King Randor's father, during the wars between him and these blue-skinned guys, King Randor's father, maybe he fell in love with a young emissary from the blue people. He ended up having a child with the blue-skinned person. Because they had just finished the war, it's so racially charged. He really loved Keldor's mother, but because of what was happening, couldn't really do it because of duty. That whole, when I become king and duty, I have to do this. Keldor, at some point, he's like, I can't stay with my own people because I'm not pure like them. I can't go to where my father is because I'm not pure for them. I'm just going to wander the land.
I think having such obvious racial issues is a huge segue from like the utopian fantasy world He-Man wants to portray. I mean, they do a lot of moral stuff, so maybe there's some merit to this, but it's just not that serious of a show. It's fun. It's fun. And not to mention, Skeletor already has a personality, but I'll talk about that later.
And all his life, his mother's told him, you're destined for greatness. It's kind of like the character of Achilles. Do you want a long life that has nothing, that really is, that no one will speak about, but you live a long time? Or do you want to live a short life that's glorious, that everyone will sing about for the ages? That's what he wants. Like, he care less about living a long life that's uneventful. Keldor went to the great library and said, hey, I need to find these books about dark magic that's no one's ever spoken about. Evelyn's father's like, no. He finds out that it's actually an altar to Hordak. And Hordak is this kind of god ancient evil that no one has ever seen or even known about for a millennia. He goes over and he says, hey, I need power. He wants to find a way to unite the blue-skinned guys and the Eternians together and not look at colors, and that's what Keldor really ultimately wants to do.
Is this the only ally you could find to fight against me? A hideous insect? A crawling, ugly bug?
Give me some little bit of your power and I'll do what you want. And then there's a fight, and that's where Keldor gets mortally wounded at his face, and he's dying. Evil Lyn takes him back to the altar of Hordak and says, save his life. And then Hordak's like, well, there's a price. I'll give you my soul to become, you're kind of what I call the prophet of Hordak, deal with the devil kind of thing. And then at that point, the birth of Skeletor happened.
Hordak is not an ancient evil. He's not immortal. He is a general in the Horde army. I don't dislike the idea of Eternians misunderstanding that, but Jay takes this a little too seriously. It's getting kind of weird. Like I said, I don't really want to accept any reality with Keldor in it, but not only that, Skeletor already knew Hordak. Hordak's not a demon, he's an alien like everyone else, and he was Skeletor's teacher. So there's already lore here, you don't need to replace it.
Sword of power, that sword has to be wielded by someone like Prince Adam to fight this power that is Hordak. Now, I like to play up the fact that Prince Adam wasn't ready for the sword. So in terms of death in the series...
In terms of death in the series, we wouldn't have it. Pretty much full stop. He-Man doesn't have death. They make it a huge point to make sure that no characters get hurt or especially die. I mean, even just like monsters, there's always some trap that He-Man sets where he's like, oh, they'll be out by the time that we're gone. Like, all right, if that's what you want to tell yourself. But the point is that death can never be hand-waved in He-Man. Even if you're going to include death, if that's going to be a thing that you're going to touch on, it cannot be with a wave of the hand. This is He-Man, not Game of Thrones.
I was going to have King Randor die while He-Man is out away. So when He-Man comes back, he finds his father dead. I had this idea that Skeletor found this kind of loophole in the laws of Eternia that allowed him, heir to the throne, to challenge the guy who's on the throne now to personal combat. Eventually ends up mortally wounding him and killing him. When He-Man comes back, Skeletor is sitting on the throne. I had this really cool idea where he's sitting on the throne and He-Man's like, pulls out the sword, he's like, what have you done? And Skeletor's like, you can't touch me. I'm the king now. You have to listen to me.
This is just not how the people of Eternia would react. This isn't Shakespeare, it's He-Man. Even if there were laws putting someone in charge Eternia didn't want, they would find some way to justify their rebellion against him because doing what's right, quote-unquote, is what they believe in. Honor and tradition have never been important to them, or to the show.
Now we will do battle, Randor, to prove which one of us is the true king of Eternia.
No, Tamask. In your day, battle may have been the test of a king, but now it is wisdom, compassion, and reason that rule Eternia.
And so this is where you have your very first kind of moral dilemma. He-Man has always been fighting for it. This is the law, and this is what's right. But so what you're going to do is you have Prince Adam where he's like, I want revenge, but yet he can't because he's He-Man. He doesn't know what to do because Skeletor is like, I've basically made you an outlaw. So He-Man's like, he doesn't know what to do, and so he wanders.
Jay starts to get kind of weird here and proposes a plot where Adam tries to bring his father out of the 7 gates of hell, which are not a thing on Eternia. And then there's a mummy-type situation where Hordak wants to absorb Skeletor, and so Skeletor and He-Man have to work together, and Skeletor becomes like He-Man's dad in the way that Randor couldn't, whatever that means, and then goes crazy, so he begs Adam to kill him, and in the process it breaks the power sword because it was never meant for killing. And if this doesn't sound like He-Man to you, I'm here, and I get it.
The sword of power breaks. He's like, and then he reverts back to Adam, and he's like, what happened? You can't kill with the sword of power. It's about life. And so he did it, not knowing that would undo the sword. And did Skeletor always plan that? Or did Hordak always plan that? It's now King Randor, where basically he is going to the different factions of the world, all the different guys, and trying to put them all together. Remember, he doesn't have the sword anymore, right? So he has to basically use everything that he learned from being He-Man and being trained and all these kind of things without the power of He-Man.
I'll admit, I kind of like this. It's something that was never explored in either show beyond like a passing thought. How much of Adam is He-Man and how much of He-Man is Adam. And this is a point of drama that I can get behind.
Adam, you cannot, under any circumstances, reveal that you are He-Man.
Yeah, no kidding. But that's no reason that me, Prince Adam, can't show them that I've got what it takes also. And who knows? If I step up in battle, really step up, I'm no He-Man, but maybe he won't be needed.
Adam, I'm afraid that as long as there is evil in the land, He-Man will always be needed.
They know that there's this growing evil that's basically taking over lands and taking over, enslaving people. And so they're trying to go around ahead of Hordak's horde, so to speak, to unite the land. Either you unite or you die. While he was away in hell, that was when Queen Marlena gave birth to Adora. When we come back, we could do a time jump, so that way Adora is a little bit older. We don't have to see her as a 9 years old. We can actually see her as maybe like 18, 17. We get to meet Adora. Now she's part of the resistance, King Adam's kind of faction of trying to unite the people. At the end of that, what happens? King Randor's castle gets attacked. Adam is sitting there and he's holding the power, the sword of power. It's broken. I'm just gonna fight. I'm gonna die. Man-at-Arms is there and he's like, you have to leave with us. Prince Adam is like, well, you have Adora, she'll be the heir, my mother will help her. This is what I have to do. My father built this castle, built this throne. I'm going to defend it to my dying breath. Adora then comes to him and says, and what our father had done and our grandfather had done will always live in our hearts. The Eternia will always stand for everything that they built it for. And for you to die, it's not going to help anybody. Finally he takes the shards of the sword, of the power sword, and puts it in the case and then takes it away.
First, Adora and Adam are twins. Second, in He-Man, their first instinct would be to leave the palace because, like I said, they don't care about honor or tradition.
Set the others free and follow me.
Where are you going?
The throne room. The palace is collapsing.
Maybe there's like a fleeting moment of, oh no, our home. But at the end, the message would be like, letting go is sometimes necessary for us to do the thing that's right for us. And either way, this is ridiculous. He keeps talking about how young She-Ra would accept the power sword because Adam wasn't ready to be the chosen one, and she's really the good one because she has to sacrifice herself to kill Hordak and blah blah, nothing new. Nothing recognizable as He-Man.
Because you can't kill Hordak because he's this entity, his energy that's always around, which is what King Grayskull did a long time ago. But because of that, her essence is now into that sword. So the very last image of the entire series would be the Eternia Castle being rebuilt. King Adam is on the throne. He's surrounded by all the different dignitaries from all the different peoples. The sorceress, Tila, show up at the far end, and she's walking forward, and she has this big box, and King Adam opens it up. He sees that it's She-Ra's sword. This is for you to safeguard when the unspeakable evil shows up. And so he takes it and he puts it on the mantle next to the broken shards of his power sword, and then it ends on that. It's a nice kind of bookend that you start with Prince Adam, but you end with King Adam. Having the power, and with him, with no power, he was able to unite everybody. The blue-skinned guys, every different race, everybody under one banner for the greater good of everyone. There was always a moral, there was always kind of a theme that every show had. So I would like to do a thing where those morals and themes are still woven within the storyline. So you can still have stories about strong friendships and loyalty and love, themes like that I think is very inherent to the He-Man universe.
And where was the moral? Where were any morals? Did any of this matter? What did we learn? He-Man is all about learning, so what is it? Sacrifices are for the sake of good? That's not very original. Let me see if I can start over again. Robbie London, a staff writer on the original show, describes the heart of the show this way.
He-Man obviously was primarily an action show, but I think what differentiated it from others of its genre and why it has resonated for so long and so deeply is it was about family. It was about a family of characters that really cared about each other, and it had a moral tone. It had a lesson and a message that underlied all the action, and it also had comedy, and so every episode had an action goal and a conflict that resulted in action, but there was always far more going on beneath the surface.
Family, morality, comedy, these are the fundamentals of He-Man. I would never want to take action out of He-Man, that would be absolutely insane, but focusing on action is the quickest way to make He-Man just like every other action show. First of all, the fundamentals. I really do love the idea of merging She-Ra and He-Man. In a lot of ways, I think She-Ra is an improvement on He-Man because, like I mentioned, He-Man is very all over the place. In He-Man, there's not really a central conflict. There's Skeletor and his band of hoodlums that make trouble, but they're no more threatening than space pirates or sleeping monsters or anything like that. In She-Ra, there may be other elements, but the Horde's control of Etheria and the rebellion fighting against them is the central conflict, and that's an excellent way to keep a show going. Having an overarching fantasy plot seems utterly pointless to me, but having a consistent conflict like the Horde is perfect for He-Man, because anything can happen, each episode can be different, but we always know the stakes. Plus, and I know this is a preference, but the rebellion in She-Ra are the underdogs, and rooting for the underdogs I think feels a lot better than rooting for the ones who are already in power. In He-Man, the good guys already have the power, no pun intended, and the authority. They're the royal guard, the royal family, the people of Eternia are free. In Etheria, everyone is under the heel of the Horde, and that makes their fight that much more desperate and easy to invest in as an audience. So how I would apply this in practical terms is that the Horde would come to Eternia, not leaving Etheria, just expanding. Someone new would be in charge on Etheria, maybe a pre-existing villain like Shadow Weaver, or maybe even better, someone completely new chosen by Horde Prime who is totally unpredictable. Either way, now the conflict spans the two worlds. There are gates all over the planet that serves as pathways to the other planet, and nobody is safe. The He-Man family, would see firsthand how dangerous the Horde is, but not only that, they would be forced out of power. The King and Queen no longer can live in luxury, Adam can't pretend to be a lazy prince anymore, Teela and Man-at-Arms have to be more careful with their projects, and Orko's entertaining tricks are even more arbitrary. This gives them tons of room to grow and a lot of new conflict. Adam now has to find a balance between being He-Man and being a responsible soldier. Man-at-Arms has to choose whether or not to create or to fight, how to spend his time. Orko has to learn to use offensive magic on a new planet from scratch, and Teela has to learn to work with the rebels to fight. She's no longer the head of the guard, independent. All the many friends and allies He-Man has made, and there's a lot, can choose how to react to this. The dragons might retreat into isolation again, or they may help fight. It could be up to He-Man and his friends to decide how to convince the others to rebel, or if that's even something they should do and put them in danger. Not only that, She-Ra and the rebels now have the resources of Eternia. The rebellion grows bigger and stronger. Now it has two main bases, one in Etheria and one in Eternia, as the Horde grows bigger and stronger too. The episodes would be the same as they are based on individual conflicts and new things every episode. But like She-Ra, the stakes would be high, and like He-Man, things would be even more character-focused. It's not just how the characters would handle the war, how the decisions they make reflect their values and how they change as people for it, like in She-Ra, but also interpersonal relationships, like in He-Man. And maybe the heart of that starts with Adora and Adam and the King and Queen and all of them reconnecting. Maybe now that they're out of power, Adam can reveal to them that he's He-Man and Adora is She-Ra, so their family comes closer. So do the rest of the characters who form new relationships and grow from each other and become that much bigger family. Because at least 50% of the fun of merging She-Ra and He-Man is having the characters interact. Overall, I'd want it to be very reflective of the 80s show. The personalities of the characters, the humor and charm of both of the shows, I would barely change them, just a little update. For example, one thing I love about the 2002 show is that Adam actually is a bratty kid before he becomes He-Man. He's not just pretending.
Should the forces of evil attack...
What forces of evil? My father and the Defenders drove him away years ago.
It's actually a huge change. The Hazard Pitch Adam wouldn't be 16, he'd be like 18, and appear like Adam does in the 2002 show, though maybe a little taller. Obviously the same with She-Ra, so it would still be really unlikely that they would be He-Man and She-Ra, but there would be more of a point to it having that much of a change. I liked the amount that a lot of the minor characters were shown in the 2002 show, like Man-E-Faces, Ram-Man, and Stratos, and how they're involved with the Royal Guard seems a lot more solid in the 2002 show, so I totally want to keep that, and just in general, see more of them and their motivations, especially regarding the invasion of the Horde. The art style of the show would be a mix between the 80s show and the 2002 show, as centralized and as dynamic as the 2002 designs, and as glorious as the existence of actual animation is. I miss the colors and the fun of the 80s show. The crazy otherworldly beauty of Eternia is lost in the 2002 show, and I'd want to bring that back. It's silly, but it's also really lovely and fun, and it makes the show really pleasant to watch. It would still be full of action, obviously, but the episodes I think would sort of vary based on plot. Either they're plot-based or they're character-focused, but neither of them are completely without the other. And there's an equal amount of each. He-Man can't be like Game of Thrones, but what I would say it could be like is The Hunger Games. I'm not a huge fan of The Hunger Games, mostly because I feel like for how serious it is, it focuses too much on the characters and not enough on making the conflicts believable. But He-Man isn't that serious, so in He-Man's case, I think it works. The conflict is important, but it's more of a backdrop for exploring the characters' motivations and personalities, their strengths and weaknesses. The plot is the source of the conflict, though, not like misunderstandings. They'll argue about how to handle a situation, what to sacrifice, right and wrong, etc. Speaking of right and wrong, this is a big deal in the He-Man world. In the He-Man world, morality is black and white, and violence is a big no-no. Which means that as I watch, there are plenty of times where I want to shout at He-Man, just punch the guy. But He-Man always finds a way out of having to hurt anyone or wrong anyone. There is no moral ambiguity. She-Ra does a little bit of a better job of this, and I think it's because of the desperation of the situation. They recognize that violence is necessary, and I'd like to see a little bit of that in He-Man. Just a difference in philosophy.
Montana, have you ever heard of the Trolls of Spikeheart?
Trolls? Oh, She-Ra, you wouldn't. They hate hordemen.
Yes, they do, but they like us. And if we were to ask them to get some information from Montana...
Oh, I don't even like to guess what they might do to him.
Oh, it would be awful. But he says he won't tell us anything.
Wait a minute.
But instead of it being just a mishmash of confusing motives, or all one singular view of good and evil, I would retcon it a little bit so that instead of those ideas just floating around, the He-Man characters would live by a singular code, like the Justicar code in Mass Effect 2, where they know deep down that it's not applicable to every situation, but they have to try. And they wouldn't act like it's a religion, they'd treat it like it's the Hippocratic Oath. Of course it would be a little religious because it's a philosophy, and the sorceress would be like sort of the keeper of the codex, and she's kind of like a monk, so... But it's not just their way of life, it's the foundation of their society. Taking the idea of King Grayskull from the 2002 show, who He-Man is apparently a reincarnation of, maybe King Grayskull was the one, or one of the ones, who founded this set of rules that the devout Eternians live by. And so He-Man being the prophet of this code makes a lot of sense. I think with She-Ra and Etheria, this isn't really important. They've never had a code like this, and so there's a little bit of a struggle between their different approaches to conflict. The Rebels think the Etherians are too squeaky clean, and don't understand that their idyllic vision just isn't practical. And the Eternians think that the Rebels are a little bit lost in their ways. But a lot of episodes would end with them coming to a compromise. Like I mentioned, Skeletor already has a personality, and it's really interesting. The most prominent thing about him is that he just isn't scary, and he never will be. Don't get me wrong, I love Skeletor. I would not want any less of Skeletor. In fact, I want more. Bring on the Bone Man. He's a bad, selfish guy, and he's actually a really powerful sorcerer. He's right up there with the sorcerers and He-Man, and is a match for both of them. But Skeletor is also like a petulant child sometimes.
You received word yet from the circus?
You mean about your request for them to perform here at Snake Mountain?
Yes. When will they arrive?
They won't. They turned you down.
They what?
And he has an odd sort of innocence about him. In the Christmas special, he can't stand to let children freeze or leave a puppy behind, and you could argue that it's just for the Christmas special, you know, but can you actually see him hurting children, or any innocent person for that matter? All the residents of Snake Mountain get tested at some point, especially Skeletor and Evil Lyn, and Filmation likes to show us that they are three-dimensional, just like the main characters. Like in the episode The Witch and the Warrior, when Teela and Evil Lyn have to work together, for example. That's the kind of thing that gives He-Man its charm. The dedication to its characters and the belief that everyone has a little bit of good in them. Skeletor is one guy, and Snake Mountain is more like a gang than an army. Next to Hordak, he's kind of chill. Hordak can be cruel. Hordak punishes his soldiers, and it makes sense because power corrupts. But Skeletor doesn't really have that much power. Skeletor himself is an underdog. It makes us look at him with affection, and that's why Skeletor will never really be scary. He's just too darling, and I would never want to take that away. The one thing I would change about Skeletor would also be a major change to the show, and that would be the concept of death. Death would be kind of impermanent in He-Man. I think a big deal in He-Man, the original, was how dangerous things really are, but how well they are solved despite the danger, so they can have a moral at the end about safety or whatever. Like, the stakes are still high, even though this is an innocent show. And that's probably good for kids, but in real life, violence does happen, and I think kids are more aware of it than ever. And the right decision isn't always the most obvious one. Things are messy. In the He-Man universe, things are crystal clear, and for that reason, I feel like the consequences should be lifted just a little bit. Death wouldn't be common, and it certainly wouldn't be something to just toss in whenever. It would be a serious consequence and a real threat. But with all this philosophy and magic flying around, I think adding the question of what happens when you die is perfectly reasonable, especially for an action kids show. Just because death is impermanent doesn't mean it should be treated frivolously, but essentially what this comes down to is if the characters are going to have such pure souls and make all the right decisions, then the consequences for doing the wrong thing should be lifted a little bit. I think it balances out the idea of existence being that simple. In the world of He-Man, life is simple and fair, so why can't death also be? How this applies to Skeletor is obviously that he has a skull face. Like I've said, I dislike Keldor or any reality where Skeletor ever had a face. But I still can't help but wonder exactly what he is and how such a spooky looking guy could ever have been the student of someone as goofy as Hordak. Well, I'd like to explain it like Skeletor is a construct created by the Horde, maybe using the bones of powerful enemies they've defeated, or something even more ambiguous. And maybe there are others of Skeletor's kind too, just messing around somewhere. But Skeletor was special in that he was more ambitious, more powerful, but also more sensitive and more alive than the rest. Through his power, he eventually gained that weird blue body of his and became a force to be reckoned with. Hordak taught him and said he would become his right hand, but at the height of his power, when Skeletor thinks everything is looking up, Hordak is the one who betrays him and is like, "Fool, you thought I could ever take a ghostly homunculus as a prodigy? I trained you just so I could drain you of your power. You're not even a real person. You're just a creation, an abomination of death." But Skeletor is awesome and escapes. He's not hurt by this, he's just enraged and determined to prove his worth to himself. As Skeletor escapes, he just does a really good job of it, and Hordak is super apologetic. And it's like, "You're more powerful than I thought." And Skeletor's like, "I'm leaving and you better not follow me." And Hordak is like, I won't. And essentially Skeletor goes to Eternia to start his own thing, and that's the full backstory of Skeletor and why he's determined to be the best at evil, because what is he if not the best at evil? That's what he was created for. But he's going to do it his way, which is also why he's so self-centered. He's petulant like a child because he never really was one. He's kind of just feeling life out as he goes along, and that's how we get to the funny yet dangerous Skeletor we all know and love. Jay Olivia talked about fight choreography and large sweeping shots of battles, but that's just not He-Man. If He-Man is going to perform an act of violence, it will never be in the middle of an action scene. Say He-Man has to stab someone in the arm, and it will save the lives of 3 people. It won't kill the person, and it will save lives, but hurting someone goes directly against that code. The scene would not be one of action. His hand would shake, there'd be a close-up of his face, and a close-up on the face of his enemy, and he'd stall, and the world around him would become muffled like he's underwater. And probably Orko is screaming, "Just do it, more are coming," while Teal's on the other side like, "The code will forgive, it's up to you." And he knows that he'll never escape the guilt if he does this one minor warlike act, but he has to make the choice, and that's how violence would almost always be approached in He-Man. Regular action still doesn't require big epic shots, because the things that He-Man does with action are all MacGyver-style things. And in order to enjoy the ingenuity of them, we need to actually see them sort of up close. The way he'll knock a weapon out of someone's hand or trap someone non-violently. The non-violent means of these things are important and shouldn't be missed by using the wrong kind of focus. Large sweeping shots should be saved for non-action action. Traveling and chases and acrobatic stunts, with a huge focus on the scenery of Eternia and Etheria. We don't need another Marvel-style battle scene with explosions and stuff. That's not going to stick with us. But imagine a Ghibli-style, large, sweeping shot of He-Man and Battle Cat charging almost silently across the alien plains of Eternia in the light of its 2 moons. You know that even on such a beautiful night, the situation is too desperate for He-Man to enjoy the view. The Horde threatens the freedom of all, and people's lives could be lost. He doesn't know what he'll face when he arrives at his destination, but thanks to the Etherian rebel initiation and the love and support of his friends and the belief in his code, he's ready for anything, and you can see it in his eyes. He's terrified for the future, but more than that, he's hopeful, and risking everything for the people he loves. The ghost of his smile passes over him as he thinks of how proud his family is of him, and this is exactly what he was born to do. Battle Cat, his closest friend, senses his pride and he roars with renewed strength and confidence. He leaps with He-Man toward their next adventure. That's a shot I wouldn't forget. Essentially what's wrong with Jay's pitch isn't the amount of drama, it's the pieces he put together to make that drama. Those pieces don't actually exist in He-Man. Jay proposes a plot that requires Eternia to exist like it's a regular fantasy medieval society, with standard Skyrim-style fantasy rules, your most basic dime a dozen fantasy setting. When Eternia's character comes from the fact that it's a dungeon punk, magitech, wacky, unpredictable, and whimsical Dr. Seuss-style near utopia, Eternia's problems are unique and fantastic. They come from all sides, from a giant alien entity coming down to judge the people of Eternia, to a dragon that wants to marry a human girl. Eternia is full of surprises, but Jay offers a completely standard fantasy war plot. He proposes characters that are almost completely unrecognizable to who they're based off of. Virtuous, wise, and innocent Adam in Jay's pitch is a regular, honor-bound, impulsive warrior hero. Jay thinks Skeletor needs to have good intentions to be a captivating villain, stripping him of all of his eccentricity and completely ignoring the endearing things that make Skeletor Skeletor. Capable women become powerless damsels. Whole unique factions with very specified ways of living, like the Horde and Snake Mountain, just disappear in favor of another prophetic, ancient evil threat. And like I've stated throughout this thing, all the fun and all the heart and whimsy of He-Man is just gone. In my head, my proposition looks really similar to the original structures of both She-Ra and He-Man, just updated. I wouldn't want to see it take on the super serious tone of some currently running kids' cartoons, but not hyperactive either. It wouldn't be a superhero-style action show or something overly goofy. I've actually never seen the DreamWorks Dragons Defenders of Berk TV show, but my reboot would be like what I imagine that show is like. Action, adventure, high stakes, but with an air of whimsy and a focus on characters, relationships, and emotions. Something that's ultimately a family comedy before it's an action show. And the action isn't oversaturated, but when there is action, it totally intrigues you. Every move means something. I'd love to make a show that animators would actually have fun animating, and that background painters could just go nuts with. Something that would be fun. You wouldn't tune in to see He-Man's latest awesome plan to defeat the bad guys. You'd tune in just to see what these characters are up to, and how they're holding up against the dangerous yet bumbling villains that threaten their surreal utopian planet. Just to learn more about them, watch them change and grow, fight and work together, but mostly just live their lives in the crazy, chaotic universe they exist in. Because we can get action and drama nearly anywhere, but a skull-faced man demanding to see the circus? A huge muscle-bound dude who couldn't hurt a fly? An astronaut from Earth ruling as a queen on an alien planet? A green tiger who always sounds like he's on the verge of tears? A gang consisting of a fish man, a reptile man, a furry man, a guy with an iron jaw, and just a regular sorceress? Aliens and dragons and widgets and unicorns and gryphons and robots and mermaids and trolls and goblins and giants? This is the color I want to keep He-Man painted with. But even more importantly, dedication to it makes the characters unique. Their love for each other and how they interact with the planets they're working to defend. That's what I think the heart of He-Man already is, and what I want to stay true to. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, you're an angel. I would tell you to like, comment, and subscribe, but I don't actually put out videos regularly, and I don't care if you like the video, and I mean, I care if you like it, but not like it, you know. And I would say comment, but I work kind of hard on this, and I kind of don't really want to debate, you know. If you want to say, like, if you want to give me, you know, something extra, that'd be great, but I don't really want to argue with anyone, so, you know, but I can't stop you, I guess. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks, bye. You have no idea how many times I had to avoid saying She-Man and He-Ra.